Welcome to Spicer and Company. I'm Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Well, we've been talking a lot about police reform and police misconduct recently, but the big question is who should really be held accountable for keeping law enforcement in check?
Yeah, a lot of the protesters on the street seem to be directing their anger at President Trump. But the question is that the right place to direct the anger? Because after all, aren't local governments responsible for local police departments? It's not the job of the federal government. But let's step back for a moment and take a look at the 33 largest cities in this country. 26 of those cities are governed by Democratic mayors, only 5 by Republicans, and 2 by independents. Now, even more revealing, here are the top 10 most dangerous cities in the U.S., according to Forbes magazine. Guess what? All 10 of these cities have Democratic mayors, and all of them at least for 3 decades. Fun fact, Memphis has actually had a Democrat since 1893. So why are all of these folks blaming President Trump, who's only been in office for 3 years, for all of the unrest? Helping us to break it down and joining us now is the former mayor of New York, who is also President Trump's personal attorney, Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Okay, humor me for a second. Who is in charge of local police departments, mayors or the President of the United States?
Mayors.
Okay. And if there's going to be reform for these police departments, is it a job of the mayor or is it the job of the president?
It's the job of the mayor, of course.
Okay. And if we're going to fund them or defund them, is it the job of the president or mayors?
Mayors, city council, state legislature.
Okay. Fair enough. So here's my question. Why is all of the ire aimed at President Trump, not at these mayors who have run these cities? I mean, when you left office at the end of 2001, are the last time that a Republican ran a big city. L.A., New York, Miami, all of these cities are run by Democrats and have been for decades. And so the question is, why is the anger of the people and the media focused on the right and President Trump in particular, when these mayors are the ones who are in control of the budgets, the reforms, and everything else?
Because the Democrats are in charge of the press. They control it. They control the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNBC, MSNBC, you name it, right across the board. So, look, when I was mayor, nobody blamed Bill Clinton for anything. Anything that happened in New York City, I was blamed for. I also got the credit for reducing crime. I did get help from the federal government, both ways. But the reality is, I was in charge of the New York City Police Department. I told them, if there's a riot, we're not going to have one. First person who throws a brick gets arrested. First person who burns a car gets arrested. We don't give them a venting period of a day or two, like my Democrat predecessor did. And I had 2 major riots in my city in the 4 years before I came into office. So I came into office with a city ready to riot. And I changed it. And it hasn't rioted since the last Democratic mayor.
You know, it's interesting, though, that you've got these folks, and I spoke with the president about this last week when we talked, and we're talking about what can be done. And he brought up the fact that Biden's been in office since the 1970s. What has he done? And I think it's amazing. I think, you're right about the press. But the question is, all of these reforms, I don't get whether or not President Trump has done anything, yes or no. The bottom line is he can't change local policies, can he?
He can't, not at all. All I can do is persuade, like he did, and telling them to please act quickly when they were sitting back and having their police officers observe the riots. Now, I've handled riots in all different capacities, including in the Justice Department. What was done by the Democratic governors was completely irresponsible. They let the rioters take over for 2 or 3 days before they did anything. They could have stopped those riots right away. As soon as the peaceful protest turned into a throwing of rocks, breaking of cars, burning of, the first person gets arrested. I mean, I was shocked to see police officers all over the country watching crimes being committed.
Yeah, that to me, that's the thing. I think that the last few days here in D.C. in particular, it's been very peaceful. People going out, holding signs, making, chanting doing exactly what we're supposed to do under our First Amendment if we have a problem or want to redress the government. But I'm with you. The first few days, I couldn't believe watching these stores, these monuments get defaced, broken into, shattered, and the police officers seemingly sat by and let it happen. I can't believe that any cop was doing that because they wanted to, unless they had been told to stand down.
During that period of time, I probably talked to about 30 or 40 of them, and every single one of them told me that they were given orders by the mayor, sometimes the governor, always a Democrat, not to intervene, let them vent, let them get it out of their system. Now, all they had to do is go read a report written for a Democratic governor called the Giuliani report. It was written in 1993 for Governor Mario Cuomo, and it explained why a riot took place in a Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn under Mayor Dinkins. And it was a pogrom where black people went out and started beating up Jewish people, exclusively Jewish people. So his basic rule is you can't let it get started because Mayor Dinkins had a venting policy. Oh, let them vent. And Sharpton was right at his elbow trying to convince him to let them vent. Well, the venting was millions and millions of dollars in damage, a young man killed, and you name it. So Giuliani wrote a report. It helped elect me mayor. And it said that Dinkins had mishandled the situation, that the rule generally is you arrest the first person who breaks the law and you set the rule immediately. You don't let them get out of control. That also would have helped because they would have gotten control before the reinforcements, the Antifa people, the other anarchists came in. And I'll tell you another thing. These were well organized. These were not like the riots I remember.
Yeah.
These riots, first of all, they didn't go into the poor neighborhoods. They didn't burn up their own neighborhoods. They got instructions, some of which have been preserved by the police, probably from Antifa. Hit Madison Avenue, hit the high-end stores. Let's make money off this. $2 million in watches were taken out of one or two stores in Midtown Manhattan. These were well-orchestrated riots, not the protesters. Protesters were pawns.
Right.
But as soon as they saw they could get away with taking over a precinct in Minnesota, the thing blew open nationwide.
So here's an interesting question for you. Your successor, a couple over now, Mayor de Blasio and his wife have talked about the fact that they would love to see a New York that has no police in it. I mean, I don't know how you could even think that a big city the size of New York with as much crime that occurs there, unfortunately, could ever be that. But that's sort of a pie-in-the-sky attitude. Here's the thing that I think is interesting. De Blasio keeps talking about defunding the police, making reforms. If you're that against the police and what they do, shouldn't he lead by example and give up his police detail and say, look, this is the way that I'm going to do it? Or maybe he should have an unarmed police detail, say, hey, if you want the guns away, I'll be the first. I'm going to lead by example. My detail's gone. No more guns surrounding me. I'm one of you now.
Sean, I hadn't thought of that. That's a darn good idea. That's a darn good idea. I mean, the reality is it's absurd. I brought homicide down 60% in New York City. And I did it by adding 5,000 police officers. And the major beneficiaries of that were African Americans. Take a look at Minneapolis. 79% of the victims of murder in Minneapolis are African American, black. 79% of the suspects are black, and 79% of the murderers are black. Now, why are the suspects important? Because the suspects are generated from other blacks. The police don't go select the African Americans to arrest. Somebody calls in, gives information, says the person who raped me was of such and such a race, looked like this. So this idea of racism is really overdone. The reason for the confrontations in the black community being disproportionate to the white community is because violent crime is tremendously disproportionate. And the police are called into the black area. So when de Blasio gets rid of the police, you can expect that murders are going to go back to what they were under Dinkins.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely silly proposition. Thank you for sharing your insight, Mr. Mayor. Look forward to having you back soon.
Okay.
All right. Well, when we return, as the mayor mentioned, Seattle City Hall and a police precinct have been taken over by protesters. Is this the local government or the federal government's responsibility? Well, we're going to ask former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. Plus, is HBO, it's saying Gone with the Wind is gone. And that's not a joke. And take this now. They're going even further. There are now calls for Nickelodeon to yank the kids' cartoon program, Paw Patrol. Has the backlash against the police gone way too far? And later, is it appropriate for members of the media to march or support rallies? Is their objectivity compromised if they do? All that and a lot more coming up.